Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. We are blessed to continue with our studies. Let's start off with the intentions for seeking knowledge and teaching. I intend to seek knowledge and to teach to benefit myself and to benefit others, to remind myself and to remind others, to profit myself and to profit others, to urge adherence to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to invite to guidance and to guide to that which is good, seeking the face of Allah, His pleasure, His closeness, and His reward, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's continue on with our Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم ارزقنا يا ربي فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين وإلهام الملائكة المقربين في عافية يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين وفقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل واهدنا إلى سواء السبيل. اللهم انفعنا وارفعنا وعرفنا بالعلم النافع وانفعنا به أنفسنا وأهلنا وأوطاننا وديارنا وجميع المسلمين يا إله العالمين. الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Alhamdulillah, we continue with our legacy. We are still with the saviors of the Islamic spirit and Khawaja Nizamuddin Awliya. Life sketch of Khawaja Nizamuddin Awliya. The previous ones were just an introduction of the various Wali Allah, right, that we had gone through. Now we come on to Khawaja Nizamuddin. Popularly known by his name Nizamuddin, he was named by his father Ahmad bin Ibn Ali as Muhammad. Descending from a family of Sayyids which had migrated from Arabia to Central Asia, his grandfather Khawaja Ali and maternal grandfather Khawaja Arab, who were also cousins, had come down to Lahore and then to Budaun, where several other families of Iran and Khurasan, noted either for their noble descent or godliness, had settled down. Right, so here we are aware that among the Indians, there are those who are from the Sayyids. That means they are of the descendants of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As we are aware that during the invasion of the Tatar, many of them sought asylum in India. So it's not surprising that among the Indians also you have those with Sayyids and Sharifas also, and they are actually also descendants of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they are Indians because of intermarriage and things like that. But those who kept on their Sayyids and Sharifas, they are normally of those whose parents, whose fathers, kept on to the lineage. All right. Early education. Khawaja Nizamuddin was born at Budaun in 636 after Hijrah. But when he was only 5 years of age, his father died. So she lost his father at a very young age. His mother, who was known for her fervent piety, took pains for his proper education and moral guidance despite her appalling poverty. So you see his condition, right? Quite a number of them, the scholars actually, their fathers passed away when they were quite young. And they had very pious mothers who brought them up to become great individuals. Islamic personalities. He receives education under Maulana Alauddin Usuli. After Maulana Alauddin Usuli had taught him some elementary books on jurisprudence and a textbook named Khodori, he asked his disciple to bring a turban. So he learned, they need to learn books, and learning of books are very important because there's structure in learning of books. And that is why even in many schools, you need to go through various texts that and then you will be guided through learning of the various texts. It's not just haphazard learning where you can't really get much out of it. And so it's very important. So the teacher, he asked him to bring a turban. Khawaja Nizamuddin's mother somehow managed to purchase cotton and got it spun and woven into muslin for him. So it seems that she couldn't buy cloth. So she took cotton itself, the cotton, it's like a wool. Cotton is like a kind of plant, which tiny strands of white material, and they actually weave this white material to become cloth. Muslin is a kind of cotton cloth. All right. She also invited some of the notable theologians and mystics of the time on the occasion. Khawaja Ali, a disciple of Sheikh Jalaluddin Tabrizi, placed the first coil of the turban around his head, and all those present at that ceremony prayed for his spiritual development. So this is some kind like an initiation, or some kind like a graduation, basically. In the graduation, instead of wearing that graduation cap, they actually wear a turban. So the mother very proudly made the turban for the son and invited several personalities, several great Muslims, theologians and mystics to bless her son. Uttermost poverty, as an orphan who did not have enough to live upon, yet not unforgotten to forego his meals. That means he has yet not unorphaned to forego his meals. There are many times he has no meals. He later on that whenever he had nothing to eat, his mother used to tell him that they were Allah's guests that day. A remark was very pleasing to him. And this one is how the mother brings up a child to instill the child great sense of tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tawakkul, great sense of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, by saying that we are the guests of Allah, that means Allah will feed us. That's what she means to him, you see. So we'll wait. When there's food, and Allah wants time for us to get food, Allah will send the food to us. Once somebody sent some corn to his mother, which sufficed for their meals for quite a few days. He states that he soon becomes so sick of it that he longed for the day when his mother would again announce that they were the guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he might get some other food now. At last the day came when the gifted corn was finished, and he was told by his mother that he had to rely on the hospitality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, they are so poor, the mother most probably had no means to earn money, right? And he was still so young to earn money. So they really put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get food. Khawaja Nizamuddin says that the blissful satisfaction he derived the day from the intimation from his mother was beyond description. So this is how he was developed in his spirituality, in his great trust, and belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it was really good for him that his mother brought him up such impulsive attraction towards the Sheikh. Khawaja Nizamuddin says, when I was only 12 years old of age, still studying lexicology under Abu Bakr Harata, also known as Abu Bakr Kawal, a man who had been to Multan came to see me, my teacher. So he started learning grammar and Arabic and lexicology. So they must master Arabic. When you want to be a scholar, if you don't know Arabic, it's going to be quite difficult for you, because a lot of books are in Arabic at that time, and you are expected to know Arabic since you need to know the Quran and understand the Quran also. He began to narrate the virtues and excellence of Sheikh Bahauddin Zakaria Multani, the atmosphere of sanctity and godliness prevailing in his monastery, and the enthusiasm and eagerness of the people around him for prayers and vigils, which admit even the maid servants to pass their time in recollection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this man who came to see his teacher was Abu Bakr Harata, and he starts talking about the virtues and excellence of his Sheikh, Bahauddin Zakaria Multani, or he's called Multani because it comes from Multan. The atmosphere of sanctity. So in the place, when you go to his place, you can feel, right, the sanctity of the place, purity of the place, the calmness and the tranquility of the place, and then godliness. Everybody is having is in a state of being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have great enthusiasm and eagerness to pray, to do tahajjud, and even the maid servants pass their time in zikr. He went on with this narration, praising the Shaykh, but nothing of the description given by him awakened my response in my heart. So he's saying that despite the great description of the people in the monastery where the Shaykh was, right? The monastery is like a zawiyah, like a place where they come together to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he doesn't seem to be affected much by this narration. Thereafter, he told that from Multan, he also went to Ajudan, where he met Shaykhul Islam, Khawaja Fariduddin, who could really be called the king of the saints. And he was this man. We had his story in last lesson, right? Of how he became famous, how he became poor and became rich, poor and rich, and had kind of followers he had, and how he passed on. At once, I felt a strong and absorbing attraction towards Khawaja Fariduddin. Studies at Delhi. Khawaja Nizamuddin first came to Delhi at the age of 16 years. He spent 3 or 4 years in further studies at Delhi, where were then some of the erudite scholars of the time. So he studied under very, very, very prominent scholars. Sultan Nasiruddin Mahmud then presided over the kingdom with Ghiathuddin Balban as his chief minister. Maulana Shamsuddin Khawarizmi, also known as Khawaja Shamsul Muluk, held the office of Mustawfil Mamalik, but he was also a savant among the scholars of the time. So this, although he had office right with the king, but he was also a great Muslim. He had taken upon himself, as was the custom in those days, the additional responsibility of teaching the students along with this onerous official duty. So he got work to do, but still he spent time to teach his students. Khawaja Nizamuddin was fortunate to get himself enlisted as one of his students. He soon became a favorite of his teacher, who graciously permitted him, along with 2 of his fellow students, Qutubuddin Naqla and Burhanuddin Baqi, to take their lessons in his private apartment. So special attention was given to him by the scholar. Whenever any student absented himself was late, Khawaja Shamsul Muluk used to remonstrate them simply by saying, "What was my fault that you did not come?" All right, so this is a very, very, very different way of approaching students. Instead of calling this, scolding the student, he asked, "Did he do anything wrong that you don't want to come to my class?" That means that makes you not eager to come early, or that cause you to absent yourself. Or he jokingly remarked, "Let me know my mistakes that I may not commit it again." So this was how he approached students who were late. That's the way he scolded them. But Khawaja Nizamuddin says that Shamsul Muluk never complained whether he was late or absent. He always insisted on Khawaja Nizamuddin to come and sit with him in his own chamber. So special treatment again by Shamsul Muluk, a brilliant student. Khawaja Nizamuddin was a studious and brilliant student. He occupied a distinguished place among his classmates as an eloquent orator and skilled debater. So he was like that, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Usually these people are very, very bright people, very studious people, hardworking people. And I've always been very amazed at students who are clever, who are intelligent, and very hardworking. They don't really have to work so hard. But those who are less intelligent doesn't seem to want to work hard. But somehow it comes together, being brilliant and studying hard. His proficiency in reasoning the points cogently earned him the title of Mahfil Shikan, or the breaker of debates. All right, he's good at debating, right? He's very good at speaking. So he got a title, Mahfil Shikan, Maqam al-Hariri, a book of stylistic elegance composed in rhyme prose, was included in the curriculum in those days. So they studied poetry and rhymes and such and prose. Normally, the students used to study it like other books of literature and learn to explain its difficult passages. Hawaza Nizamuddin, however, learned 40 of his chapters by heart. So they were very good at memorizing also. So he learned books and he memorized books. Later on, when he realized the futility of his effort, he committed to his memory Masharikul Anwar, a famous compilation of traditions to make amends for his mistakes. So he realized that that effort of memorizing from that book was not really something which benefited him spiritually. So he moved on to memorize hadith, collection of hadith. He studied hadith from Sheikh Kamaluddin Zahid, a noted traditionist of his time and a disciple of Allama Hassan ibn Muhammad as-Saghani. He, the author of Masharik Kul Anwar. So he studied, he memorized Masharikul Anwar, and he further studied the Masharikul Anwar to understand the explanation behind the various hadith. In fiqh or jurisprudence, he was fortunate enough to study under Allama Burhanuddin al-Marjiniani, who had written the Hidayah of World Fame. So the Hidayah is a book, right? Book of jurisprudence, book of fiqh, and he learned it under Burhanuddin, right? Who wrote the book? So he learned, that means this person who is, you're not able to write books on fiqh if you don't have great knowledge on fiqh. But this person, so he was very fortunate to be able to learn hadith, to be able to learn fiqh. Hawaza Nizamuddin also studied Masharikul Anwar from the latter, who granted him a certificate for teaching it to others. And this is what we call an ijazah. Ijazah is after you studied certain books from under a teacher, and the teacher actually give you the permission to study, to teach it to others, and you need an ijazah to teach. So there is a link from you to the teacher, and the teacher, inshallah, eventually to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's called a sanad. Mental disquietude. Like an assiduous student from Hawaja, Nizamuddin paid, like an assiduous student, Hawaja Nizamuddin paid full attention to his studies. He wanted to achieve distinction as a man of letters, but he also felt a choking disquiet in his heart. So although he wanted to study very hard, he worked hard, right? He just loved to study. He goes on going after different types of knowledge, right? It was not the product of any apathy or lethargy, but an anxiety born out of his solicitous nature, desiring something else which could make him calm and composed. Somehow, despite learning and studying, he feels that there's this thing in his heart that calls him to do things, to give him that kind of composure and calmness and tranquility. So you need something else. He's just very disturbed. There's something missing in his life. So the pedantry of the bookish knowledge he was acquiring, as also the verbal wranglings over theoretical issues, filled him with disgust. It's somehow like Imam Ghazali, all the knowledge that he has and everything that he has learned, and also debating and everything. He doesn't seem to like all these things. Once he remarked, as a young man, I used to associate with my companions, but I always felt an aversion, a desire to avoid them all, and a longed to forsake their company. Somehow he felt that being with them doesn't seem to benefit him in many ways, or he felt there's something amiss, being in their company. So he didn't really like it. Although my friends were students and academicians engaged in literary pursuits, but often I felt agitated and told my friends that I would not remain with them for long and abandoned them. So he surely left his friends. In reply to a question by Amir Hassan ala Sajazi, he said that he had these feelings before he met Hawaja Fariduddin. So it was already in him, this turmoil in him, right, to get out of this state of just studying and studying and studying and getting knowledge, right? But somehow there is that he lacks that tranquility and joy with knowledge. The mother, Khawaja Nizamuddin, died when he was still in Delhi. Once he mentioned about the death of his mother, he wept so bitterly it became difficult to follow what he said. So he loves his mother a lot. You can imagine that, right? Growing up with a mother, without a father, and a mother being so dedicated, the mother there to bring up, to help him through being a good Muslim, and the moments that he had with his mother, right? Definitely he would weep this thinking of his mother. Lamenting, he recited this verse: Alas, no device could avail me then, nor could I chain the night of trust. Anybody can explain that? You see, nothing actually helps him in anything, right? And he could not, nor could I chain the night of trust. That means these are trials on him, right? And he couldn't leave, he couldn't let go, he couldn't like remove it, put it away, chain it up. The Khawaja says, once after sighting the new moon, I went to salute and pay my respects to my mother. She replied, whom would you pay homage next month? I once know that her death was drawing near. So because the mother is saying that, implying that, next month I will not be around, so you cannot pay your respects to me, right? So who would you? So he knew straight away she's going to die. Dejected, I began to weep and asked, Mother, to whose care do you entrust me? Tomorrow shall I answer your question, she replied, and bid me to spend the night with Sheikh Najibuddin, your mother. He asked to whom, if you are to die. And he was about 16, 17, not very old. I went away, but before dawn next day, a maidservant came running to announce that the mother wanted me at once. I inquired if she was all right. She replied in the affirmative and hastened to my mother's side. She said, yesterday you had asked me something. Now listen to me carefully. Then she asked for my right hand, and holding it in her hands, said, Ya Allah, my Rabb, I entrust him to your care. So this is the mother who leaves a son with care of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After that, she closed her eyes and bid farewell to this fleeting world. So she passed away with him by her side. So of course, that moment was a very, very significant, very sad moment for this young man, right? But of course, the fact that his mother had entrusted him to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, calling on to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? There was great joy there. I thank Allah for the reply given by my mother, for I would not have been so well pleased if she had left the house filled with rubies and gold that the reply she had given to my question. So this is the kind of person he was, right? He's not interested in money and gold. So he would prefer that would be the best reply for him, because nothing is better than being entrusted to the care of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An unfulfilled wish. At the time when the stories of the gifts and honors bestowed by the royal court on accomplished scholars, doctors, and jurists were in everyone's mouth, it was not strange that a young Khawaja aspired with his learning and straitened circumstances for a lucrative post of rank and authority. So the kings were honoring as many scholars, many top scholars, and giving them presents and things like that. And he himself, as a young man, being poor, from a very poor state, thought it would be good, right, to get a good position in the government. It was but natural for a man who had tasted the pangs of hunger, despite his spiritual yearnings, to look forward to material comforts, honor, and riches. So he had that kind of, at times, he was alone, at times he wants to be this. So this is quite normal for your young person. You move from one state to another state, right? So there's certain this is one of his wishes. He asked one day Sheikh Najibuddin Wakil to pray to Allah that he should become a Qadi. Qadi is like is a head of the Islamic Muslim community. Is like a judge kind of thing. Sheikh Najibuddin, however, kept quiet at his request. He repeated his request again, for he thought the Sheikh had not listened to him. Thereupon the Sheikh replied, don't be a Qazi, become something else. So the Sheikh is not going to do off him. First visit to Ajudan. So Ajudan is where our Fariduddin was. Sheikh Najibuddin Matwakil was a brother of Khawaja Fariduddin. Nizamuddin had already developed a feeling of great reverence for Khawaja Fariduddin while still a boy at Buda'un. His introduction to Sheikh Najibuddin, with whom he spent some of his time, inflamed his fascination for Khawaja Farid. So Sheikh Najibuddin, being the brother of Fariduddin, must have told stories of Fariduddin. So that causes him to be very much inflamed and fascinated by Khawaja. He made up his mind to repair to Ajudan, that means to go to Ajudan. However, Nizamuddin has himself given an account of his first meeting with his spiritual mentor. He says that no sooner than was he ushered in the presence of Khawaja Farid, he recited a Persian couplet which said, "Thy separation set my heart's in flames blazing, and the soul was ravaged by the flood of thy longing." So it's a couplet, right, which talks about love for the Shaykh. Being separated from you, my heart desires you, and my soul was ravaged by that longing to be with you. Nizamuddin wanted to express his keen desire to meet the Sheikh, but he found his tongue chained to this palate by the awe of Sheikh Khawaja Fariduddin. So when he saw the man, he was just full of awe, and he couldn't talk at all. Finding him overwhelmed with emotion, Khawaja Farid remarked, "Every newcomer is overtaken by awe." Khawaja Fariduddin showed special favor to Nizamuddin and ordered a cot to be provided for him in the guest house. So he was straight away liked by Fariduddin and offered was a cot. A cot is like a bed. Nizamuddin, however, hesitated to sleep on a cot at a place where numerous respectable persons, learned scholars, and divines who had committed the Quran to their bosom had spread their beddings on the ground. So he felt that it's not comfort. It's not comfortable. Doesn't feel comfortable lying down on a bed, and everybody else is on mattresses on the floor. When this was conveyed to Maulana Badruddin, who was charged with the care of his guests, he sent him the word, "Have you to follow your own whims or abide by the instructions of the Shaykh?" Nizamuddin replied, "I shall do whatever the Shaykh desires." So he was not allowed. He was in this situation, whatever the Shaykh says, they will have to follow. That is always the situation, the kind of obedience you're expected to your Shaykh. He then instructed him to sleep on the cot. Nizamuddin took the oath of fealty to Khawaja and Fariduddin, as mentioned, there is a bai'ah here. A bai'ah, that means you agree to abide by certain rules and regulations that the Sheikh has put up. And this, of course, is in line with Rasulullah's method also, as mentioned. Rasulullah also make bai'ah with men and women alike. But with the men, he would hold their hands. But with the women, no, he would just ask them to say out the agreement that they would have by being a Muslim or being a follower of Rasulullah. He was then 20 years of age. So he was young, very young. All right, we'll continue with the story next lesson. Al-Wafi, the commentary on the 40 Nawawiyah by Sheikh Mustafa Dib Al-Bugha and Sheikh Muhyi Ad-Din Mistu. Allah have mercy on both of them. Translated by Mahdi Log. Subhanallah. All right, we are going to throw this one. You know, whenever I cut this up, it's always bent, right? Because I take a photo and the book itself is bent. Okay, anyway, as long as we can read, inshallah, it's good. Hadith 22, Al-Istifamah wal-Iman. Istiqamah, sorry, not istifam. Al-Istiqamah wal-Iman. Right, you'll look at the minute. Istiqamah is consistency and iman and faith. And Abi Amrin وقيل أبي عمرة سفيان بن عبد الله الثقفي رضي الله عنه قال قلت يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قل لي في الإسلام قولا لا أسأل عنه أحدا غيرك قال قل آمنت بالله ثم استقم Rawahul Muslim. So that is the hadith, right? That we say we riwayat from Muslim is about Rasul. He says this Sahaba asked Rasulullah, tell me something, give me the words that will make sure that I don't have to ask anybody else. And Rasulullah says, have faith and be consistent, or istiqam, be upright. Istiqam is to be upright here. All right, so this is the second part. We have gone to the first part. We'll recap what we did last lesson. We need to have faith and be upright. So that's it, faith and be upright. That will allow you to be a true Muslim. This is Tawheed and obedience. So faith is Tawheed, believe in Allah, and being upright is to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obedience includes faith, excellence, and Islam. So to obey, we have faith in Allah, then you can obey. Of course, first of all, we have to submit to Allah. That's Islam. Submit to Allah. That means having this notion in ourselves that we're going to obey Allah no matter what. And then you have strong faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's Iman. And then we proceed on to Ihsan. That is excellence in our actions, our obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who believe and obey will have no fear, nor will they grieve. They grieve. Via uprightness, matters are perfected. So when you have this uprightness, this obedience to Allah, then things will be easy for you. Goodness is obtained and put in order. To master uprightness, one must leave the well-known and detach from all habits and stand before Allah with sincerity. So we must not be engaged with things that are unnecessary, and we move from all things which are bad and just move on to Allah with sincerity. We do make mistakes in striving for uprightness, so we seek forgiveness. So Allah has said, right, be upright and seek forgiveness, because in trying to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there will be lapses in our obedience. Sometimes we also might not, in our obedience, we do not make the mark. And so we seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like for example, in our effort to pray 5 times a day, our prayers are still very, very wanting. So we need to seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the heart has knowledge of Allah, it have fear, exaltation, awe, and love. So you need knowledge of Allah to fear Allah. You need knowledge of Allah to exalt Allah, to have awe of Him, and to love Him. So knowledge is very, very important. It desires Him, hopes for Him. So the heart will desire Allah. The heart will have hopes for Allah, for Him, and will dua to Him, supplicate to Him, will have tawakkul on Him alone, and all the limbs become upright upon His obedience. So these are the characteristics that will cause us to be obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and our limbs will follow suit. If the king is upright, soldiers and subjects are upright. So the king is the heart. The tongue must be upright, as it is the heart spokesman. So if the tongue is not upright, then it becomes a hypocrite, because the heart says something else. The heart feels something, but the tongue says something else. And it speaks on behalf of the heart. Uprightness is stability, triumph, vigor, and victory in the battle between obedience and passions and desires. So you're always fighting against our passions and desires. So if we are upright, we will be stable in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We will triumph over our passions and desires, and we'll have vigor, that kind of strength to fight passions and desires, and we will be victorious in the battle with passions and desires. All angels descend on the upright ones and dua for them. Uprightness is important, as it is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Uprightness is commanded upon Tawheed and sincere worship of Allah alone, sincere obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believing in one God and obeying Him. The companions are keen to learn their religion and protect their faith. So that's why they ask questions, because they are keen, right, to know about Islam and to protect their faith. All right, we go on to Hadith 22. That was Hadith 21. Oh, this is 23. Sorry, maybe mistake. 23. Tariqul Jannah, path to the path of Jannah. All right, Tariqul Jannah, Tariq is path. An Abi Abdillahi Jabir bin Abdillahi al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu. So from the Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, anna rajulan sa'ala Rasulallahi, that a man asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, faqala, he says, ara'aita, show me, you show me, ara'aita, will you show me, idha sallaytu, if I pray, salawatil maktubat, prayers that are prescribed, wasumtu Ramadan, and I fast in Ramadan, wa ahlaltul halal, and I make halal what is halal, wa haramtul haram, and I make haram what is haram, wa lam azid ala dhalika shay, and I do not increase more than that, adkhulul jannah, will I be admitted into paradise? Qala na'am, yes. Rawahul Muslim. Wa ma'na haramtul haramal ijtanabtuhu, wa ma'na ahlaltul halal fa'altuhu mu'tafi dan hillah. It is on the authority of Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari that the man asked, saying, what do you think if I pray the obligatory, something is wrong. Ask the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, ask the messenger of Allah. Ask him, saying, what do you think if I pray the obligatory prayers? If I pray the obligatory prayers, fast Ramadan, consider lawful that which is lawful and consider unlawful that which is unlawful, and I do nothing more than that, will I enter paradise? Rasulullah says yes. Rated by Muslim. The meaning of consider lawful that which is lawful is I avoid it. The meaning if I consider lawful that which is unlawful is I do it believing it is lawful. So that is consider lawful that which is lawful as I do it believing it is lawful. Consider unlawful that which is unlawful as I avoid it. So it means that the word here, lawful, which is lawful, means I'll do it believing it is lawful, and it's unlawful, which is unlawful, that means I will avoid it. All right, collections in Hadith book. Muslim has collected a Hadith in faith, the chapter on elucidating the faith that enters one into paradise, and that whoever adheres to that, to what he has been commanded, enters paradise. So here, I have only one particular hadithin who recorded this hadith. So we can see that Imam Nawawi does not only confine himself to hadiths of Sahih or Bukhari, or he has he chooses hadiths which he feels would be good for the Muslims. Okay? Not all, so many hadiths, all the hadiths are good, but critical ones. He chose the critical ones, 40 critical ones which are supposed to memorize and live by. We're doing this, the 23rd one, I think. Its importance, Al-Jurdani has said in his commentary on the 40, this hadith has an immense position. Islam revolves around it because it gathers it together. So it's all about Islam. The hadith is all about what Islam entails. This is because actions are either by the heart or by the body, and they are either authorized, which is lawful, or they are prohibited, which is unlawful. So that is everything about Islam is what is lawful and what is unlawful. So his action is by the heart or by the body. If an individual considers the lawful to be lawful and the unlawful to be unlawful, he has carried out all the functions of the religion and he safely enters paradise. So that is what it is to enter paradise. Allah has promised us. We try our very best to obey Allah, Rasulullah SAW, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah, and avoid all that is bad that he says no to. The language of the hadith. We got Rajulan. He says, a man came, Rajulan. This is an Nu'man bin Qawqal al-Khuzai, another narration. He was present at Badr and was martyred on the day of Uhud. So this is the man who questioned Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, on that day, I swear to you, Ya Rabb of might, the sun will not go down until I have set my lame foot in the greenery of paradise. So at Uhud, right, he swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he would die before sunset. And he would enter paradise. He believes so strongly in the hadith of Rasulullah and he has done what he has done as a Muslim. That means pray 5 times a day, fast in the month of Ramadan, and do what is lawful and avoid what is unlawful. And he was sure when Rasulullah says yes, so he did what he has done, and he was sure he's going to go to paradise. After he had been martyred, Rasulullah said, and Nu'man had a good opinion of Allah, and thus he found him to be as he thought of him, for I've seen him treading in his greenery without any lameness or limping. So he's a man who was limping, right? He has a problem with his leg, but because he trusts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Because Rasulullah says, yes, you will enter paradise if that's what you do, and he believes in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was admitted into paradise. And Rasulullah saw him walking in paradise and not limping anymore. Ara'aita, ara'aita. Letter A indicates a question. So do you see? Right? Can you let me see? Right? But this man is tell me and inform. Ra'a is to see. And means see means here not to see. Can you see what I means? Can you understand right? So he asked Rasulullah to make him understand. Right? Inform me, tell me. That's the meaning of ara'aita. Like it's ara'aita allazi yukazzibu bid-din. Do you not see ara'aita allazi, those who deny yukazzibu bid-din, the religion? Din is the religion. Yukazzibu bid-din. He denies the reality of the religion that Allah has blessed us with certain faculties, and so that is ara'ait. Do you not see? Right? So that is see. So here is, can you make me see this situation here? Al-maktubat, from the word kitab, right? It means what has been written down, which is a 5 daily prayers. Ramadan, of course, Ramadan. Ahlaltu tul halal. Right? I make halal, ahlaltu, I make halal, the halal. I'm firmly convinced that it is lawful and carry out the obligation thereof. As for that which is not obligatory, there is no objection to not doing it. The lawful, halal, is that which is authorized to be done in the revealed law. Haram tu, I make haram the haram. Haram tu, I avoid it, or being firmly convinced that it is haram. The unlawful is everything that the revealed law has decisively prohibited. For sure, it is haram, then it is haram. Hulu jannah, right? Hulul jannah. Question: will I be admitted to Jannah with those who went before without any punishment preceding one's entry? Let me straight away go to Jannah. Will I be admitted to Jannah? Legal matters and other guidance from the Hadith. The Messenger of Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is a mercy to all mankind, all creation. Allah the Exalted sent His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as a mercy to all of mankind, to save them from the misguidance that leads to the fire and leads them along the path of guidance that leads to paradise. And the path of paradise is clear and easy. So this is what we do know. This is what we believe. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a mercy to all mankind, because He brings us away from hellfire and directs us and guides us to paradise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set limits for it and obligated certain conduct therein. So there are limits, right? We cannot do certain things, we cannot trespass the limits set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we must do certain things in order to be blessed with the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is Jannah. Whoever stays within those limits and sticks with them will reach the right destination, and whoever transgresses them and violates them will be led into the hellfire. It's a reality, right? We stick to the limits set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's called the hudud. Hudud is plural of had. Had is the limit, right? So we just move on, right? Trying our very best to be obedient slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Avoid transgressing His limits, else we will go astray. We transgress His limit, or even be among the maghdub, those who incur anger for disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nevertheless, the limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set and what He has obligated are within man's ability and capacity, because Allah, the Exalted, wants ease for His slaves and does not want hardship for them. This is what some people might want to argue, that the religion is easy for you. Right? That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha. Right? Not Allah impose on a soul except what is within his capacity. Right? People use this verse and they actually become very upset with this verse, because especially so when they are in very, very deep difficulties, in stressful situations, in unhappiness, in grief, in all kinds of fears, right? And the reality is that these people, this is actually referring to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We believe that Allah is our creator and He knows what we can do and what we cannot do. If we ask to do anything, then it is something which we are capable to do. It is not beyond our capacity to do it. And if He stops us from doing it, then we are able to stop ourselves from doing it, and we have the strength, but we need to do a lot to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the verse, we go back to this verse. This is verse 285, I think, in Surah Al-Baqarah. Yes. Or 86, 85, it's last verse or something like that, right? But Allah continues and say, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت, for him what he does, وعليها ما اكتسبت, and against him what he does. So the problem is that your life is full of problems because of what you yourself do. If you do good, you get good. If you do bad, you get bad. So it is all about. All right. So look at your situation. Ask yourself why things are not doing right, being right in your way. Ask yourself, are you obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You have prayed 5 times a day, you have fasted, you have done what is necessary to be done, and somehow, right, there are certain lapses, right, that cause you to be in a state of unhappiness, right, a state of fear, a state of grief. That is all from your own actions. If you have done everything and anything, and still you understand, or you're in a state of in a bad state, right? Then most probably, then just take it as a test from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala that is to bring you closer to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. You ask yourself how you should bring you what should you do in reaction to the particular state that you are in. Right. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned again in Surah Al-Baqarah that we will have a decrease in life, in wealth, and lots of things like fruits and things like that. Right. But if you say inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, reminding yourself that you are from Allah and you will return to Him, and you need to hold yourself and look through the whole situation and ask yourself, how is the best way to approach this tragedy that is in your life? You see it as a tragedy, right? Then Allah will bless you, and Allah continuing for the verse, Allah will send salutations with you. Allah will make things easy for you because you look at it in a way that Allah wants you to. So laws are easy. Allah, it is easy for us because it is what we are made to do. Right? It is not against our nature, and that is why good things are called ma'ruf and bad things are called munkar. Munkar is ma'ruf means something which we are familiar with, which is good for our soul, and munkar is something which is alien to us that we should not be doing. It actually creates a lot of struggles in our soul when we move on to doing munkar. That means things which are bad for our soul. So this is clearly and manifestly apparent in his guidance as in this hadith and others that bear similar meaning. That this is what it is. You pray 5 times a day, in this particular hadith, pray 5 times a day, you fast in the month of Ramadan, right, with the sincerity of being of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is halal, you say is halal. What is haram, you say is haram. You don't make the haram become halal. You don't make the halal become haram. And then you will go to paradise, inshallah. Okay, we'll take a break here and we'll continue in 10 minutes. Sorry. All right, we continue with our lesson, Yearning for Paradise. Sorry, we are continuing with the video first. Then we go on to our lesson. On to the video first. Still with Akim Murad, one more lesson with him, just 9 minutes.
Rahmatullahi alayhi says, defines it quite simply. التصوف خلق فمن زاد عليك في التصوف زاد عليك في الخلق أيضا. Tasawwuf is good character. So whoever improves your character has improved your Sufism. That's what an indigenous definition is, not an Orientalist definition, not a modern polemical definition, or not the Iranian definition, which really problematizes and sometimes persecutes Tasawwuf. But the indigenous definition is simply transcending yourself and applying that inner dimension of the Sunnah. So Islam is to be a total package, not just for what you do with your body, which is the fiqh, or what you do with your mind, which is the aqidah, but something deeper still, your consciousness, your internal subjectivity, your ruh, your nafs, all of that needs to be purified. Anybody who doesn't think that they need sorting out in their internal lives really doesn't have too much self-reflection. That is a necessary discipline. And when the ulama say, فَوَاجِبٌ تَقْلِيدُ حَبْرٍ مِّنْهُمْ, they mean it in a Shara'i sense as well. Because if you look at the books of Usul al-Fiqh, the books which explain in extraordinary detail sometimes the rules whereby the Sunni legitimately deduces the rulings of the Sharia from the Quran and the Sunnah, and it's really complicated because the text sometimes really complicated and Arabic is really difficult and you have to use all kinds of rigorous methods of deduction rather than just saying what you think it means, that the first thing you have to get a handle on is your own self-awareness. Because ultimately these things are about theory choice. And theory choice is determined by the human subjectivity, which is often subject to emotion. And this is fatal. The Holy Prophet ﷺ says, لا يقضي القاضي وهو غضبان. A judge should not give a verdict when he is angry. We can see why, but that is the case. And it's also the case for fatwa. Nobody, however many qualifications he may have, is allowed to give a fatwa if they're in a kind of state of emotional turbulence. And this, it seems to me, is part of the tragedy of the ummah nowadays, which is that instead of setting aside the lower tendencies of envy and fear and anxiety and rivalry and the stuff that every one of us, including myself, have within ourselves, to identify it through muhasabah and self-knowledge, and putting it in its box and stamping on it and keeping it out of the way of dealing with the Quran and the Sunnah. Instead, we open the sort of box, the Pandora's box of all of those afarit, all of those demons, and they're the ones that sway us when we reach for particular fatwas and options. That's a catastrophe, and that's really the end of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And that's the tragedy of the Ummah today. People saying, I know that the consensus of the Ummah is X, but I'm really angry, and therefore I'm going to follow Y, because I've seen this clip on YouTube where somebody seems to be saying that you can interpret it that way. That's the end of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, because that's breaking all of the rules. And the reason for that is lam yatasawwaf, that individual has not worn the prophetic robe, the robe of not really being interested in dunya and being in complete control of emotion, not in some kind of stoic philosophical way abolishing emotion, because that would be inhuman, but instead to have it all in due balance and the ego to be disengaged. All of the problems of today's ummah, it seems to me, are the result of ego, nafs, shaitan, hawa. And when that gets into the driving seat in religion and its institutions, then you have a kind of inversion. Instead of religion becoming the symbol of everything that brings hope to humanity and a symbol of that which is 1,000 times better than the sort of mega consumer turmoil that the world is now trapped in, instead of it being a symbol of beauty and openness and something ideal, it becomes simply a mirror to the envy and the anger and the viciousness of the souls of the people who now think that they're in charge of the texts. So if that's the alternative to yatasawwaf, then it is haram. The alternative to purifying the self is to have an impure self. And you can't disengage the self from the process of delivering fatwa and choosing your fatwas. And therefore, religion becomes just a mirror of the ugliness of your own inner life, of your own frustrations and disappointments, perhaps even your mental illness. You find interpretations that gratify that deep inner imbalance. And the result is a catastrophe, and religion becoming the inversion of what it should be. Instead of showing to people through the Sunnah, and Islam is the Sunnah, the beauty of the heart of the chosen one, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the joy with which people entered Islam, instead you show them the raging volcano of your own anxieties and fears and disquiet and envy and viciousness. If you're showing them that and you say that is Islam, then that is the ultimate blasphemy against the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because you're saying my ugliness is the Sunnah, and you're attributing the turbulences and the darkness of your own ego or sub-ego to the best of creation sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's the worst thing anybody can ever do. To attribute ugliness to the one who is the purest is about the worst decision that anybody can take. And this is the way the shaitan and the nafs and the hawa operate. They want to take the best things, those things that give most light and hope and serenity to humanity and the human heart, and to turn them into things that are scary and ugly, that drive the world away. So instead of da'wah, invitation, you have tanfir, repulsion, which is inevitably what happens when people are not able to yatasawwaf, to control themselves, to understand themselves, to overcome their lower impulses. So in that sense, we would say that classical Islam, as enshrined in the doctrine of Imam Laqani, is correct, is actually correct. Whether or not you define Sufism as a particular type of tasawwuf or not is not really the point. Tasawwuf, as understood by the ulama, all of those commentators on Bukhari, means the process of self-transformation, the process of dhikr, the process of remembering Allah, the process of fikr, the process of reaching out and seeing the humanity and the vulnerability and the needs of others, and not really paying too much attention to your own insecurities, because inwardly, when we really think about ourselves, we see there's not an awful lot there that's really beautiful and interesting. So forget that. Look at the other. Look at the ghayr. Without that possibility, without that tasawwafa, Islam is simply a megaphone for our own shaitan, for our own hawa. And therefore, not to engage in tasawwuf, it is clear, and this really should be a matter of consensus for Muslims, if we're using this indigenous vocabulary, that tasawwafa is actually an obligation if the alternative is tanfir and the uglification of Allah's religion and the taking of decisions and fatwa choices that are subversive and close the doors of Allah's mercy to human beings who have never needed their creator more than they do in this age of confusion and precariousness. That's a monstrous sin. So we would probably say, we don't need this thing, Sufism, but we would probably say, using the indigenous vocabulary, we have to have this thing, tasawwuf. And that's why the ulama consistently, really without exception, down the centuries of our civilization have agreed that we do need this thing called tasawwuf. And even some people will say, but Imam Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says the Sufis do this and that. Read him for yourself. Don't listen to what the brothers in the masjid are telling you. Read him. And yes, his commentary on the Futuh al-Ghayb of Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. He loves Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. Case closed. Who is a Sufi if not Abdul Qadir al-Jilani? Yes, of course, he has issues with certain aspects of the Wahdat al-Wujud school. That's fine. He has issues with them. They're well expressed. But it's not against tasawwuf. Ibn Taymiyyah is not against tasawwuf. Who is? This is one of the remarkable points of unanimity and consistency in our civilization. Despite the many voices and the plurality which we've always said has constituted its most authentic theme, still, the ulama have agreed, the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that this tasawwuf really is necessary in order to operationalize your Islam. Even if you don't use that word for whatever reason, even if you just say self-knowledge and dhikr and riyada and muhasabah and sabr and shukr and husn al-khuluq, use that vocabulary instead, that's fine. But the term that ulama have usually preferred to define the science of those inward processes of transformation is tasawwafa. So we would conclude that Islam can do without Sufism, but Sunni Islam is constituted by having tasawwuf at its heart. And without it, it will have no heart. It may be as well here to cite the great
All right, we continue on with our lesson. That was about purifications of the heart, purification of the heart from envy, from all kinds of emotions, so that we will not be dragged into making decisions because of our emotions and not because of the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And so we purify ourselves, inshallah. We continue yearning for paradise and seeking its path. Jabir is telling us about that believer who yearns for a garden that is as wide as the heavens and the earth, prepared for the people of taqwa. So he came and asked the messenger Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about his path and what actions would enter him into his vastness. So he has heard about the beauties of Jannah, and he wants to know what is it that would allow him to enter Jannah. And he actually had some questions on the things that he should be doing so that they will allow him to enter Jannah, because he wants to enter Jannah. Thus Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam showed him what he wanted, and his wish came true, and he went to Jannah. Questions like this and seeking guidance were repeated often by the Prophet's companions in different ways on various occasions. So many of the Prophet's companions, they are all eager to enter Jannah, and they want to know how is it that they can, how to really enter, how they can enter Jannah. Al-Bukhari and Muslim have related about Abu Ayyub al-Ansari that a man said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Tell me about a deed that will enter me into paradise." He replied that you worship Allah and not associate anything with him, establish the salat, pay the zakat, and maintain ties of kinship. So you've got different states here. So of course, prayer is very important. You should never ever miss your prayer, right? Pray 5 times a day, pay the zakat. Of course, when you have the money, enough money, then you pay the zakat. Savings, now saving, of course, worship Allah. That means to not give any partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, full obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Importantly, to maintain ties of kinship, do not quarrel and do not fight and do not break relations. Learn to see things in different ways and not allow yourself to break relations. In Muslims' narration, show me a deed I can do that will bring me closer to paradise and take me far away from the fire. In both Sahih collections, there is a similar narration from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu that he has, and fast Ramadan instead of maintain ties of kinship. So there are various hadiths, and according to some scholars, it depends on the person who's asking. But it's always there, the prayer, the zakat is always there, right? Ramadan is what is wajib, must be done. And of course, some people, they have difficulty in maintaining ties of kinship, right? Because of the way they see things, because of the way they talk, because of the way they get upset with people, and the way they manage their emotions usually. Ahmad has related with this chain of transmission from Ibn al-Muntafiq, who said, I came to Rasulullah sallallahu when he was at Arafat, and I said, I want to ask you about 2 things. So he was at Arafat, and he saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What will save me from the fire and what will enter me into paradise? You want to go to paradise? You want to go to Jannah? Or you want to go to the fire? So ask yourself, right? What is it that will save you from the fire? He replied, if only you had made your question brief, for you have asked about something immense and the path to it is long. This is asking, I'm not quite sure, but if only you had made your question brief, Mr. Rasulullah expected to ask in a shorter way, but Rasulullah did acknowledge that the question is really a very strong and powerful question, and the path to it is long. Rasulullah is telling us that it's long. Understand the following from me: worship Allah and do not associate anything with it. So that's the most critical thing, is to be believing in Allah, take Allah as your only God, and live life for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not for any other thing but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Establish the prescribed prayers. There's no way out. You must pray 5 times a day. Pay the zakat if you have enough savings. Fast Ramadan. What you love people to do for you, do it for them. Be good to others, right? Do good to others as they do good to you. If you want them to do good to you. What you hate to be done to you, protect people from it. Don't do bad things, right? That you don't want others to do against you. All right, third one. Adhering to obligation and leaving unlawful matters is the foundation of success. You want to be successful? You need to do what is compulsory and you need to leave the unlawful matters. We've gone through this hadith in which Rasulullah says, whatever I ask you, do as much as you can. Whatever I forbid, avoid it. So that what is forbidden must be avoided. And Nu'man asked Rasulullah, if a person consistently performs the obligatory prayers based on the exhausted statement, Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. Surely salat is prescribed on believers, right? A clear prescription at specific times. Mawquta, waqi. At specific times, you must pray at the times of the salat. Prayer is prescribed for the believers at specific times. Surah An-Nisa, verse 103. So we cannot pray as and when we wish to pray. Subuh is subuh, before sunset, between dawn and sunset. Zohar is just after the sun slips from its highest most position, and Asar is when the shadow is double. And Maghrib is when the sun sets, and Isha is when it's very dark. So these are the 5 times that they need to pray. And if the month of Ramadan comes, which is obligated to fast based on the exhausted statements from the Quran, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم شهر فليصمه. Then, right, so this is on the Quran. The month of Ramadan is the one in which the Quran was sent down as guidance for mankind, with clear signs containing guidance and discrimination. Any of you who are resident for the month should fast in it. So if you are alive and you know the month is there, then you must fast Ramadan. And he fasted, adhering to its etiquette and observing its sanctity. Right. So we know that Ramadan is a month of blessings and a month of sanctity. It is sanctified, it is honored, an honored month. We should honor the month. Even if we are not fasting or we can't fast because of certain reasons, then we should not dishonor the month by eating openly. We should, right, keep to the honor of honoring the month. Then if he stays in the limits of Allah has said concerning the lawful and the unlawful, and does not consider the lawful unlawful or the unlawful lawful, but rather is firmly convinced that the lawful is what Allah has made lawful and the unlawful is what he has made unlawful, and thus he completely avoids the unlawful and carries that which obligatory from the lawful. So that's what it is, right? We must, to know what is lawful and unlawful, we need to learn fiqh. We need to know what is good, what is not good, what is allowed, what is not allowed, right? Of course, in the Quran also there are, but the hadith also has got more of them, what is allowed and what's not allowed. So when it is not allowed, we go and say it's not allowed. When it's allowed, we say it is lawful and we do it. If it's unlawful, we avoid it. The question if he does all that and does not add any recommended or virtuous deeds, such as doing supererogatory acts and leaving that which is disliked, and leaving certain lawful things out of carefulness sometimes, is that enough for him to be saved according to Allah the Exalted Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and be entered into paradise, which is the extent of his hope and desire? Right, what was his question? His question was that he just pray 5 times a day. He doesn't add on any sunnah, anything else, right? Whatever is recommended, whatever is virtuous, doesn't do. He doesn't do any sunnah prayers, right? Such as doing supererogatory prayer, acts, and leaving that which is disliked, right? And sometimes he does macro things. Does not add any recommended or virtuous deeds, such as doing supererogatory acts and leaving that which is disliked. So this is virtue. To leave macro thing is a virtuous thing, right? To do sunnah acts are virtuous, recommended, but not are virtuous, right? And are recommended, but they are not compulsory. And leaving certain lawful things out of carefulness sometimes. So he leave lawful things because he is very careful at times. right? Like for example, lawful things here would be food. Seems lawful, but somehow you got some reservations about it's good, right? So you're careful. So is that enough for him to be saved according to Allah, the Exalted, and be entered the paradise? So is it enough for him to be admitted in the paradise, which is what he hoped for and what he desires, along with the elite that draw near to Allah and the righteous people of before? So he wants to be admitted in the paradise with all those who are doing more than he did and the righteous people without undergoing any punishment or castigation. So will he be directly admitted in the paradise without being punished? Because there are those people, Muslims, who will go to hell first before they go to heaven because of the sins that they commit. So in this case, he is saying that he is not going to commit any sin. If it's unlawful, he'll take it as unlawful and he's not going to act on it. And if it's lawful, he's going to do it as best as he can, right? And of course, the obligatory things he will do, like praying and fasting. Rasulullah answers him with that which puts his soul at ease, expands his chest, brings joy to his heart, and realizes his desire. So Rasulullah says yes. So that one word is enough to make him happy. His soul is at ease. His chest is expanded. That means he is full of joy. He is, doesn't have constriction in his heart, right? He is not depressed, and he brings joy to his heart and realizes his desire. So you get what he wants. He says yes. In other words, the deeds that you have mentioned are sufficient for obtaining your goal of entering paradise. How would they not? The messenger informs us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah SAW informs us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who draw near to me do not draw near with anything that matches what I have made obligatory upon them. That means by doing only the obligatory actions, you will get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just by praying 5 times a day, no sunnahs. Just by doing Ramadan, no sunnah fast, right? Just by giving zakat and ensuring what is lawful, you take it as lawful and not to disobey Allah and not to say it's unlawful. And then the unlawful you say is unlawful, and you will not want to disobey Allah in that. Which is a hadith Qudsi related by Al-Bukhari. Indeed, for you is happiness, O believer, in Allah's good news, for he says, وَالْحَافِظُونَ لِحَدُودِ اللَّهِ وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Those who preserve Allah's limits. That means they look after, they take care of the limits set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and give good news to the believers. Surah Tawbah, verse 112. An-Nasa'i, Ibn Hibban, and Al-Hakim has related Rasulullah SAW said, no slave prays for 5 prayers, fasts Ramadan, pays the zakat, and avoids the 7 major sins, except that all the doors of paradise are open unto him, and he enters whichever one he wants. That's it. It is. So it's easy. 5 prayers, fast Ramadan, give zakat, and avoid the 7 major sins. So what are the 7 major sins? Then he recited, in tajtanibu kaba'ira ma tanhauna anhu nukaffir ankum sayiatikum wa nudkhilkum mudkhalan karima. If you avoid the major sins you have been forbidden, we will erase your bad actions from you and admit you by a gate of honor, enter Jannah. So Allah will remove all the bad, evil things from you and allow you to enter Jannah. We are aware that many actions of us will cause our minor sins to be forgiven. It doesn't mean that keep on disobeying Allah with the minor sins, but it means that you should it is forgivable, minor sins, but not the major sins require you to make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the minor sins, when we take wudu, the minor sins will fall off our limbs, right? But then there are scholars who tell us that the minor sins are like pieces of wood. The more you do it, it will pile up and it can create a bonfire which will burn you eventually. So try not to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it's minor sins, right? As Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu has said, it is not the sin that matters. It is a fact that you are disobeying your creator, and that you should take note of. It's a terrible thing. Sayyidina Ali is concerned, to disobey the Creator. But it is a fact that if you avoid the major sins, right, and you still go on praying 5 times a day and fast Ramadan and pay the zakat, then you would be admitted into Jannah. The hadith and topics are many and mass transmitted. The 7 major sins are fornication, drinking wine, sorcery, accusing someone known to be chaste of fornication, killing someone deliberately who has not done anything wrong, dealing in usury, and fleeing from the enemies of Islam on the battlefield. Other major sins have mentions in the hadith, and Allah knows best. All right, so we stop there for the 40 hadiths of Imam Nawawi. We continue with our surah Fussilat. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We did verses 24 to 25 in the last lesson. We are talking about the hell people in hellfire, right? And Allah says, if they will endure till the fire is their abode. That means no matter what, no matter how patient they are, right, they will still stay in the fire. Which means that patience is only in this world. You need to hold yourself when you are in this world, but not in the next world. No matter, you can be as patient as you are dealing with the hellfire, but that's what it is. You'll stay in the fire. If they ask for goodwill, they won't be granted goodwill. That means when they are in fire, they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reduce or to have some mercy on them, they will not be given mercy. Allah appointed for them comrades to beautify the past and the future. So we understand this, that they have shaitan, they have their desires, they have got their temptations that beautify, that makes them say what they did was good in the past and what they are going to do is good. Whereas it's all sinful things, but they beautify the sins for them. The word proved true against the jinns and the men that have passed away. They shall surely be losers. So the fact that they disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Allah has promised that He will fulfill. So the word is the word against those who disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who has passed among the jinn and men, they will surely go to hell because they have disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were losers. All right, we continue with the next verse. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, and said those they disbelieved, لَا تَسْمَعُوا, don't listen, لِهَذَا الْقُرْآنِ, to this Quran. وَالْأَغَوْا, and make noise, فِيهِ, in it, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَغْلِبُونَ, perhaps you subdue, you will overcome. Ghalab is to overcome, you will overcome. All right, what do we have here? Now we go back to the world, right? Allah described the states of these people who disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are adamant against believing in the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and said those they disbelieve, la, don't listen to this Quran. So that was what they were doing. They were telling people not to listen to the Quran. This refers to the leaders among the disbelievers who reigned on the idolaters of Arabia and whose attitude was commended. In order to impede the call of the Quran, these people teach their ruffians that when they see Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam reciting the Quran to his people, they should not listen to it and also not let others listen to it. So that was what they were doing. They were discouraging people from listening to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَغَاوْا فِيهِ, and make lots of noise in it. So they make lots of noise, they bang things and everything, so people cannot hear the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the contrary, they should hoot and yell at it to create discord and pandemonium so that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's voice is subdued and their own voice is dominant. So that was how they were. It was how they treated Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They make all kinds of noise. They would not allow people to listen to the Quran, right? And they denied and they stopped people from believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So propaganda against religion has existed at all times. Those whose words do not stand to reason hinder people from listening to the logical words uttered by others. So they will not allow people to say true things. They want to be the one that's loud. Although there might be a few of them, but they want to be loud. Like we have our this group of people called Pink Dot, right? They go out there and they start talking and saying all kinds of things, right? When we say logical things, they will not listen to us. They will try to shut us up by saying we are anti-family, we are anti-love, and we are narrow-minded, and all kinds of things they will say against us. The clause fihi indicates the endeavor to make deviation in the true path through vain acts. That means they find ways and means to bring people from the true path by their whistling, by their clapping, by their making noise, by their telling tales. They tell stories, right? There's one in Rasulullah used to have gatherings in the house of Al-Arqam, and many people would walk after they heard about this religion, about these verses from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They all eager to listen, so they would go and walk towards Arqam's house to be with Rasulullah. But there was a man, and along the way he would not let these people go. He will tell stories of Persian tales and this and that, and cause the people to just forget their first aim of going there is to listen to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They create suspicion, they raise irrelevant questions, and this is all shown by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. It is written by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu concerning the occasion of revelation of the blessed verse 26 that the chiefs of disbelievers failed at imitating Quranic verses and were afraid that Arabs from different regions depart from Mecca and believe in the prophetic call. So we see the situation here. Rasulullah SAW was sent first to Mecca. Why Mecca and not Medina? Right? In Mecca is a center of pilgrimage. Arabs from all over the Arabian Peninsula will come to Mecca and congregate for Umrah, for Hajj. And this rites were still there. They still practiced, but with some corruptive elements introduced into the rites that was taught by Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. So when they came and they heard the Quran, some of them actually became Muslims. Example will be Abu Zar Ghifari. Ghifari also came from a distant place from Mecca for pilgrimage. And then we've got Tufail. Tufail also came to do his pilgrimage, and he was warned against listening to Rasulullah SAW. But it seems that a number of them actually listened and brought back the religion of Islam to their towns. And that made the Arabs, the Quraysh, very, very angry. And so they find ways and means, right, to cause the people not to accept Islam. So one of the ways that they were doing was to make a lot of noise when Rasulullah SAW was reciting the verses of the Quran. Following consultations, they decided to distract the Prophet ﷺ and his audience while he was reciting the Holy Quran. They realized that the Quran was very powerful and is the means that people are attracted to the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course, this is because we are aware that the people of Saudi Arabia at that time, they are people of great literary prowess, and they actually appreciate good literature. And Quran was just so astounding, was just so what they call it? We say it incapacitates people. People just become amazed and they just are lost for words when they heard the Quran. So that could not be allowed by the Quraysh. They heard the Quran. The Quraysh knew that the Quran was divine, but they don't want to believe in the Quran, and they don't want others to believe in the Quran despite its divinity. But if Allah wills, there are those who actually listened and converted. And that is how the people of Medina, right, came to Mecca for the pilgrimage and brought back Islam to Medina, and eventually invited Rasulullah ﷺ to Medina. Serving this purpose, they gathered at his reciting the Quran verses and sang songs, uttered vain words, whistled, and clapped their hands so as to impede the audience from listening to the noble Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَغْلِبُونَ. Perhaps you will overcome, or you will be victorious against the message. Enemies of religion imagined that they could extinguish divine light, but they were unaware that divine light may not be put out. So they thought, they believed perhaps you all would be able to overcome the verses of the Quran will overcome this message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On to the next set. فَلَنُذِيقَنَّ, and surely we will taste, surely will taste those alladhina kafaru, they disbelieve, adhaban shadida, they will taste the punishment, the severe punishment. وَلَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ, and surely we will repay them. But jaza is to repay, na is a we. لَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَسْوَاءَ الَّذِي كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ, the worst that they were doing. Therefore, we will mostly make those who disbelieve taste a severe punishment, and we will most certainly reward them for the evil deeds they used to do. So Allah says, surely, 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 Allah will make those people who disbelieve, they will definitely taste a terrible, terrible punishment. The disbelievers resorted to such inappropriate and inhuman act, imagining that they could succeed in their evil ways. So perhaps you would overcome Rasulullah, but were unaware that they would fail and thereby pave the way for their perdition, their destruction, since it is emphatically stated that they shall taste excruciating torments. And shadid is really, really, really terrible, terrible punishment and chastisements for their vicious deeds. وَلَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَسْوَاءَ الَّذِي كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ, and they will be recompensed, they will be repaid with the worst, right, of their sins for what they have done. In other words, at the moment, these naive people cannot assess how much sin they are accumulating for themselves by stopping people from the Quran and by creating confusion in it. It is only when all the results came before them that they will be able to know the extent of loss they have inflicted on themselves, the worst of their actions, but they will get to know what terrible things they did, and they will be repaid for the terrible things they have done. In this world, man cannot fully assess the results of his deeds. Every deed of a person, whether good or bad, has the potential of affecting others. It is because of this characteristic of a deed that at times a small virtue multiplies and becomes as large as a mountain. Similarly, a vice, which may seem very ordinary in its rudimentary stage, can end up in a great magnitude. Sometimes people think, oh, it's just a simple sin. Oh, it's okay. Come on lah. Don't be so strict lah. It's just a little thing. Let's just be a bit more flexible with things and things like that, right? So we have the story of Abu Sisa, how he actually rationalized he actually allowed himself to do things which says, oh, it's okay, come on. When the girls, you remember the story of Abu Sisa, we had the story before, how he was asked to look after a young girl, and then Shaitan instigated him and told him, poor girl, why not just talk to her? It's just a simple talk, come on lah, nothing will happen from the talk. So that's the kind of thing, right? Where small is small, but eventually he committed zina with a girl and killed the girl and her baby. Eventually he destroyed himself. And he was a pious person, but he allowed himself to justify actions which eventually goes on to disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ذَلِكَ, that جَزَاءُ أَعْدَاءِ اللَّهِ, the recompense of the enemies of Allah, النار, the fire. Lahum, for them, fiha, in it, darul khuld, the home of eternity. Jaza'an, a recompense, bima kanu bi ayatina yajhadun, because they were denying the ayahs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In that recompense, that is the way they are repaid. In that they were in our signs denying. They were denying the sons of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that was their punishment. They were punished. Allah explained why they were punished, because they denied the ayahs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dhalika jaza'u a'da'illahi nar. The recompense of those who are enemies to Allah is the hellfire. How are you enemies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because you reject the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You make fun of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You make noise when the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are being recited. We have people now burning Quran, people now stepping on the Quran. Allah will deal with them. We just object to it, but dealing with them, leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they are dishonoring the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they are not punished in this world, they will be punished in this world. So they will be, their punishment is hell. The demonstrative pronoun dhalika refers to the horrible fate they will encounter as referred to earlier. Right? That they will be in the worst of state, that they will be in the hellfire, terrible punishment. It is evident from textual indications that the expression A'da'illah refers to the leaders of Quraysh, who threw their rocks and ruffians were after subduing the call of the Quran. They will be encountered by people who today have become enemies of Allah and His religion, and it should be clearly understood that this result refers to hell. So they will eventually be sent to hellfire for their rejection of the Quran, for their manipulation of the Quran, for their making fun of the Quran, and dishonoring the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Lahum, for them especially, in it, in the hellfire, Darul Khulud, a home of eternity. That means they will be the home of eternity. They will be in hell forever. In this fire will be the abodes of the leaders of disbelief, where they will have to dwell forever. Not everyone dwell in the hell forever. There are those people, especially those people, as Rasulullah has said, that if they believe in Allah alone, La ilaha illallah, they said La ilaha illallah, they will eventually enter heaven. But their disobedience to Allah will cause them to go to hell first. Jaza'am bima kanu bi ayatina yajhadun. A recompense because they were with the ayahs Allah denying. So they were always denying the ayahs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They will get this punishment because they persisted in denying the revelations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Neither did they pay heed to them, nor did they let others pay heed to them. So they don't want to listen, they don't let others listen, they make noise when the Quran was recited. So that is the reason why they will be sent to hellfire, and they will be in the hellfire forever. Waqala, and said, Alladhina, those kafaru, they disbelieve, Rabbana, our Rabb, Arina, show us. Alladhina, those adallana, misguided us, minal jinni, of the jinn, wal ins, and men. And the men, I said and here. Wal ins, and the men. Naj'alhuma, we put both tahta, below, aqdamina, our feet. Liyakuna, so both be minal asfalin, of the lowest ones. And those who disbelieve will say, our Rabb, show us those who led us astray from among the jinn and the men, that we may trample them up under our feet, so that they may be of the lowest. All right, now Allah brings us into the conversation in the hellfire. Those who disbelieve were already in the hellfire, they were going to be punished. So they said, they call on Allah, Rabbana, our Rabb. Now they admit that Allah is their only Rabb. Arina, show us those. They are the ones who caused us to go astray from the jinn and mankind. So they realized in the hellfire that there were some jinns, shaitan of course, who brings them away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are also men who brings them away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The disbelievers find themselves in the shadows of abyss and the blazing hellfire, lose their hope of deliverance, and utter such words out of desperateness, wishing to find those who led them to such unfortunate state. So now they're looking out for those who actually seduced them, who actually brought them away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They know that there's jinn and man who misled them. They called on Allah to show these horrible creatures. It was reported that Ali radiallahu anhu said concerning the phrase, Alladhina adallana, those they brought us astray. Iblis is the son of Adam who killed his brother. As-Sudi reported that Ali radiallahu anhu said, Iblis is followed by everyone who commits shirk, and the son of Adam is followed by anyone who commits a major sin. All right, so those who commit shirk, they are the followers of Iblis. Those who do major sins are the followers of the son of Adam alayhi salam, who killed his brother. So Iblis is the one who calls people to every evil thing, such as shirk and lesser sins. As for the first son of Adam, it is confirmed in the hadith, Ma qutilat nafsun zulman illa kana ala bni Adam al-awwali kiflum min damiha. لأنه أول من سن القتل. No soul is wrongfully killed, but a share of the burden of that sin will be upon the first son of Adam. So whoever kills the sin, a part of the sin will go to the son of Adam, because he was the first one who set the precedent of killing another. Now, so this one tells us that whoever starts a sin, right, whenever that sin is being committed, he will get part of the sin also, because he started killing. He was the first one to kill, so all the sins of the killers will go to him. Naj'alhuma tahta aqdamina. Now, those who are in hellfire are so angry that they are in hellfire, and they blame those who lead them astray. They want to put these people who the jinn and human beings who led them astray, they want to put them under their feet and step on them for what they have done against them. We refer to the masses that were lured and led astray by the leaders. So these are not the leaders, but those who were led astray. Neither did the leaders pay heed to the call of the Quran, nor did, as far as they could, let others pay heed to it. The verse implies that today these people are faithfully following their leaders. However, when they see the fate which their leaders will lead them to, they will wreathe with anger and request Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to let them catch a glimpse of those among the men and jinn who led them astray, so that they could trample them under their feet, and as a result, teach them a lesson for their arrogance and misuse of power, and thereby pacify themselves. So they really want to take revenge on those people who seduce them or who stop them from listening to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Liyakuna minal asfalin, and they are so fed up, so mad, so that they want to make them of those who are the lowest of the low, being stabbed by others who are angry. We make them beneath us in the torments, that they will be punished more severely than us. It shows how angry they will be with their leaders. They will want to disgrace their leaders and send them to the lowest hell. So that was the state of the people, right, of hellfire. Those who followed their leaders in disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, we'll stop here. Allahumma anta rabbi la ilaha illa anta khalaqtani wa ana abduka wa ana ala ahdika wa wa'dika mastata'tu a'udzu bika min syarri ma sana'tu abu'u lak bi ni'matika alayya wa abu'u bi dhanbi faghfirli innahu la yaghfiru dzunuba illa anta. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbana anfa'na bima 'allamtana. Rabbi 'allimna alladhi yanfa'una. Rabbi faqihna wa faqih ahlana wa qarabatil lana fi dinina ma'a ahli al-qutri أنثى وذكر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. العصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلى الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك الحمد